April 7, 1947. Dearborn, Michigan. The sky has collapsed. A torrential flood is screaming down the Rouge River, a surge of water so powerful it has breached the banks of the most technologically advanced estate in America, Fairlane. Inside the private hydroelectric dam, designed by Thomas Edison himself, the turbines groan and seize. The copper coils that once sang with the hum of progress grow silent. One by one, the lights of the 56-room mansion flicker and die. In a master bedroom draped in shadows, lying in a bed of heavy carved oak, is Henry Ford. The man who put the world on wheels, the man who shattered the stillness of the 19th century with the roar of the assembly line, the man who, more than any other human being, electrified the spirit of the American dream. And yet, as the breath rattles in his chest, there is no electric light, there is no telephone, the lines are down, the kingdom is cut off. He is illuminated by a single kerosene lamp, the same flickering primitive light that had watched him enter the world in a farmhouse in 1863. The paradox is complete. He spent his life building the future, only for the past to reclaim him in his final hour. He had built a kingdom of steel and speed, but at 11:40 p.m., the world's richest man dies in the silence of the pre-industrial age. He died in the dark. Every dynasty begins with a secret. For the Fords, the secret was a woman named Clara. In the winter of 1893, while the rest of Detroit slept, Henry Ford was in his kitchen, obsessed with a gasoline buggy that most people believed was a toy for fools. He was a man of cold calculation, but Clara was the believer. She didn't just support him, she held the lantern, literally. While he tinkered with his first internal combustion engine on their kitchen sink, she stood there in the cold, her hands steady, her faith unshakable. This was the birth of the Ford miracle. By 1908, the Model T arrived. It wasn't just a car, it was a social earthquake. Ford didn't just want to sell to the rich, he wanted to democratize the skyline. He realized that if he could build a car for the great multitude, he would become more powerful than any king. Then came 1914, the $5-a-day revolution. In an era of predatory capitalism, Ford did the unthinkable. He doubled his workers' wages overnight. The world called him a socialist. The old money elite called him a madman. But Ford was no philanthropist. He was an autocrat of efficiency. He knew that well-paid workers were loyal workers. He was building a consumer class that could afford the very product they manufactured. He wasn't just building cars, he was building an empire where the sun never set on the Ford logo. By 1915, the world was too loud for Henry Ford. He retreated. He built Fairlane, a 1,300-acre estate that was less of a home and more of a machine for living. Constructed from unpolished limestone, the house was designed to be a self-sufficient fortress. It had its own vegetable gardens, its own cattle, and most importantly, its own power. Ford didn't trust the municipal grid. He didn't trust the outside world. He convinced his best friend, Thomas Edison, to design a private hydroelectric dam. Underneath the manicured lawns lay a 300-foot underground tunnel that connected the main house to a secret laboratory where Ford worked in solitude. He had built a kingdom where he was the only citizen. He could close the gates, turn on his own turbines, and watch the world go by from his porch. He had achieved the ultimate old money dream, total isolation through total technology. But a fortress designed to keep the world out also keeps the ghosts in. Behind the limestone walls, the paradox of Henry Ford began to rot. The man who loved the people grew to loathe his own son, Edsel. Edsel was the artist, the man who wanted to bring style and grace to the Ford brand. To Henry, grace was weakness. Henry empowered a man named Harry Bennett, a former boxer who ran a paramilitary force within the Ford plants. Bennett was the enforcer.
While Edsel tried to run the company with diplomacy, Henry used Bennett to terrorize the unions and, cruelly, to undermine his own son. The Battle of the Overpass in 1937 showed the world the dark heart of the Ford kingdom. Blood on the concrete, the roar of the autocrat drowning out the cries for fairness. When Edsel died of stomach cancer in 1943, broken by his father's relentless cruelty, Henry didn't weep. He simply took the reins back. He had outlived his heir, and in doing so, he had doomed his legacy to a slow, agonizing decline.
We cannot speak of the limestone walls without speaking of the malice that lived within them. The man who gave the world mobility also gave it a manual for hatred. Through his newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, Ford published a series of viciously anti-Semitic articles that would later influence the darkest regimes of Europe. In 1938, he accepted a medal from Nazi Germany. This is the central paradox of Henry Ford. How can a man be so brilliant in his mechanics and so bankrupt in his humanity? How can the man who built the future be so tethered to the prejudices of the past? He was a man of logic who fell victim to the most illogical of hatreds. When the news broke on April 8, 1947, 7 million people paused. The world had lost a titan. The funeral was a sea of umbrellas and silence. But as they lowered the limestone-colored casket into the Michigan soil, the irony of his death lingered in the air, like the smell of kerosene. Henry Ford spent billions to control the world, to control his family, and to control the very flow of the river that powered his home. But you cannot stop the river from rising. He died in the dark, in the same flickering light he was born in. Because for all his gears and all his gold, he could not build a machine that could outrun time. The Ford dynasty survived, the cars still roll off the line, but the man is just a ghost in a limestone fortress, forever searching for a light that will never come back on.